In the early years of the 19th century, the United States stood as a young republic filled with ambition. Having secured its independence only a few decades earlier, the nation turned its gaze westward, believing it was destined to expand across the North American continent. This belief, known as manifest destiny, became the guiding spirit of American growth. As settlers moved into new territories, the frontier pushed further toward the Pacific, displacing indigenous peoples and reshaping the land into the foundation of a rising power. By the mid-19th century, the United States had grown enormously in both size and strength. The Louisiana Purchase had doubled its territory, the annexation of Texas added vast new lands, and the victory in the Mexican-American War brought California, New Mexico, and Arizona under its control. With new lands came new resources: gold, cotton, timber, and fertile soil that fueled the nation's economic rise. Railroads connected the coasts, industries expanded, and American goods began reaching distant markets. What began as continental ambition was transforming into a global vision. As the 19th century drew to a close, a new idea took root. The United States would not only dominate its own continent, but extend its influence across the world. Industrialization had made America one of the most powerful economies on Earth. Its factories demanded raw materials, its merchants sought new markets, and its leaders sought prestige equal to the great empires of Europe. A sense of destiny once confined to the western frontier now pointed outward across the oceans. In 1898, a single war would change everything. The Spanish-American War, fought under the slogan of liberation, marked the birth of the American Empire. The conflict began with cries to free Cuba from Spanish rule, but by the war's end, the United States had seized Spain's remaining colonies, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. American forces arrived not as liberators, but as new masters. For the first time, the United States possessed overseas territories and found itself ruling millions of people beyond its continental borders. In the Philippines, resistance erupted almost immediately. Filipino nationalists who had fought against Spain turned their weapons on the new occupiers. The ensuing conflict was brutal, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. American leaders justified their control by invoking the language of civilization and progress, claiming it was their duty to bring order and democracy to the islands. Yet beneath this moral language lay economic and strategic motives. The Philippines offered access to Asian markets, naval bases in the Pacific, and a symbol of America's new global reach. At the same time, Hawaii was annexed, completing America's chain of influence across the Pacific Ocean. The islands, once an independent kingdom, were taken through political manipulation and pressure from American businessmen who dominated the sugar industry. Their strategic location made Hawaii a critical link between the continental United States and its new territories in Asia. With these acquisitions, America became an oceanic power. In Latin America and the Caribbean, expansion took a different form. The United States did not always seize land outright, but exerted control through economic and political dominance. The Monroe Doctrine, first declared in 1823, warned European nations to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. By the turn of the 20th century, President Theodore Roosevelt added his own interpretation, the Roosevelt Corollary, asserting America's right to intervene in Latin American nations to maintain stability and protect U.S. interests. It was imperialism without the title of empire. The construction of the Panama Canal in the early 1900s became a symbol of American ambition and engineering might. By supporting Panama's independence from Colombia, the United States secured control over the Canal Zone, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and solidifying its dominance in global trade. The canal became not only a route for commerce, but a strategic artery for the U.S. Navy, allowing rapid movement between oceans and reinforcing America's role as a maritime superpower. Throughout Central America and the Caribbean, American interventions multiplied. Troops landed in Nicaragua, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, often to protect business interests or prevent European interference. U.S.-based companies like the United Fruit Company gained vast influence, controlling land, labor, and politics. Entire economies became dependent on American corporations, giving rise to the term banana republics. Though these actions were justified as maintaining order, they reflected a new kind of empire, one built on money rather than conquest. As the First World War erupted in 1914, the United States at first remained apart, but its growing industrial might and resources made it indispensable to the Allied powers. When America finally entered the war in 1917, it emerged as a global leader. After the war, President Woodrow Wilson spoke of self-determination and democracy, yet America continued to hold territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. The contradiction between ideals and actions revealed the tension at the heart of the American project, a republic that championed liberty but ruled colonies of its own. The interwar years saw the United States expand its economic reach rather than its borders. Through trade, investment, and cultural influence, it became a dominant force in the Western Hemisphere. By the time of World War II, America had transformed into the arsenal of democracy, supplying allies with weapons, technology, and financial support. The war effort supercharged the economy and established the United States as the preeminent industrial power of the world. When the Second World War ended in 1945, the United States stood on the world stage not just as a victor, but as a superpower. Its military bases stretched across the globe, from Europe to Asia to the Pacific. Yet rather than traditional colonies, America's post-war empire was one of influence. It founded global institutions such as the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. These organizations promoted stability and economic growth, but also reflected American values and priorities. The dollar replaced the pound as the world's currency, and American corporations became global giants. During the Cold War, the United States framed its global presence as a struggle between freedom and tyranny. The competition with the Soviet Union justified interventions around the world. In places like Korea, Vietnam, and Latin America, the United States supported governments and movements that aligned with its interests. Though presented as efforts to contain communism, these actions often protected economic investments and extended political influence. The empire of bases grew. By the 1960s, the U.S. maintained hundreds of military installations across continents, forming a network of power. As the Cold War came to an end in 1991, the world shifted into a new era. The Soviet Union collapsed, and for the first time in modern history, there was only one global superpower. The United States emerged from the 20th century not merely as a nation, but as a force shaping the destiny of others. Its military, economic, and cultural influence stretched farther than any empire before it. The ideological battles that had defined much of the 20th century faded, replaced by the language of globalization, free markets, and democracy. Yet beneath these ideals lay the same enduring pursuit of influence and dominance that had driven American expansion since the 19th century. In the decade that followed, the U.S. embraced its role as the architect of a new world order. The 1990s became a time of both confidence and transformation. With the fall of communism, markets once closed to the West opened to American investment and culture. Former adversaries sought U.S. partnership and aid. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization expanded eastward, and multinational corporations grew into global giants, exporting American goods, technology, and lifestyles to every corner of the globe. McDonald's, Microsoft, and Hollywood films became symbols of modernity, spreading a new kind of empire. An empire not ruled by soldiers, but by commerce and culture. The Gulf War of 1991, fought to repel Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, revealed the overwhelming might of American military power. Broadcast live to millions around the world, it demonstrated precision weapons, high technology, and coordination unlike anything seen before. The war was swift and decisive, reasserting the United States' ability to shape international events through force. But beyond the battlefield, it also marked the beginning of a new kind of imperial presence. One defined by forward bases, alliances, and global surveillance rather than territorial control. Throughout the 1990s, America became the engine of globalization. The spread of the internet, pioneered by American scientists and entrepreneurs, transformed communication, commerce, and culture. Silicon Valley, once a cluster of small technology firms, became the new frontier of innovation. Companies like Apple, Intel, and Google revolutionized the world economy, reshaping industries and creating digital networks that transcended borders. The United States exported not only products but systems of thought, economic models, and cultural ideals that redefined the modern age. At the same time, the world's dependence on American finance and technology deepened. The dollar became the backbone of international trade, Wall Street dictated global trends, and American corporations dominated emerging markets. From Asia to Africa, developing nations adopted neoliberal policies promoted by international institutions largely influenced by Washington. The promise of globalization was prosperity, but the reality was complex. Some nations thrived, while others found themselves more dependent than ever on American capital and markets. In popular culture, American influence reached unprecedented levels. Hollywood films filled theaters from Tokyo to Cairo, shaping dreams and narratives across societies. American music, hip-hop, rock, and pop became the soundtrack of youth worldwide. Television and advertising exported not just entertainment, but values, individualism, consumerism, and optimism. With the rise of cable networks and later digital media, the United States controlled the global conversation, setting the tone for what modern life should look like. This was empire reborn in a new form, an empire of imagination and aspiration. The dawn of the 21st century brought both triumph and tragedy. The attacks of September 11, 2001 shocked the world and tested America's sense of invulnerability. In response, the United States launched the War on Terror, beginning with the invasion of Afghanistan and later Iraq. The campaigns were framed as battles for freedom and security, echoing the rhetoric of earlier eras. Yet, as in the Philippines a century before, the wars revealed the complexity of exporting power and ideals. What began as swift military victories became prolonged struggles. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 marked a return to direct intervention, justified by the promise of democracy and the elimination of threats. American troops toppled regimes, rebuilt governments, and occupied lands far from home. For some, it was evidence of moral leadership. For others, it was a sign of imperial overreach. The wars consumed vast resources and reshaped geopolitics, leaving deep marks on the Middle East and on America itself. The promise of spreading freedom echoed the nation's oldest justifications for expansion, but the cost, both human and moral, raised questions about the true nature of power. Meanwhile, technological and economic dominance continued to grow. The rise of global corporations like Amazon, Facebook, and Google extended American reach into the daily lives of billions. These platforms became the new instruments of influence, shaping opinions, politics, and economies without armies or flags. Data replaced territory as the new frontier, and the United States led the way in defining its boundaries. In cyberspace, American power was invisible yet absolute, a digital empire built on information, innovation, and control. Throughout the early 21st century, the balance between power and principle remained fragile. The 2008 financial crisis revealed the vulnerabilities of global interdependence. When the U.S. economy faltered, the shockwaves rippled worldwide. Yet even in crisis, the world turned to America for stability. Its currency remained strong, its corporations rebounded, and its influence persisted. The crisis underscored the paradox of American dominance. Though often blamed for global instability, the United States remained indispensable to the functioning of the world economy. Cultural influence continued to evolve. The internet democratized communication, but American platforms dominated the digital landscape. From social media trends to film streaming services, the United States remained the primary exporter of content and culture. English became the language of global communication, and American pop culture shaped identities across continents. The reach of this soft power was immense, subtle, persuasive, and enduring. Even in regions that criticized American policies, its music, movies, and technology thrived. In military terms, the United States maintained a presence unlike any in history. Hundreds of bases across the world ensured rapid deployment anywhere on the planet. Its navy patrolled international waters, its aircraft dominated the skies, and its satellites watched over the Earth. The structure of empire had changed, but the essence remained. The instruments of control were more sophisticated, but the goal, to maintain influence and protect interests, was the same. By the second decade of the 21st century, challenges began to emerge to this dominance. The rise of China as an economic powerhouse, the resurgence of Russia, and the shifting alliances in Asia and the Middle East signaled a new multipolar world. Yet the foundations of global order, trade systems, digital networks, and financial institutions still reflected the design of American power. The ideals of democracy, human rights, and free enterprise, though contested, continued to frame the international conversation. Technological innovation remained America's most enduring form of influence. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and renewable energy industries positioned the United States at the forefront of the next global transformation. Silicon Valley became the heart of a new empire, one built not on conquest, but on creativity. Its power lay in shaping the tools through which the world thought, worked, and connected. In every smartphone, every software platform, and every digital transaction, traces of American ingenuity persisted. As the 21st century unfolded, the nature of empire continued to evolve. America's reach was no longer measured in colonies or occupied territories, but in systems, alliances, and ideas. Its influence extended through international law, humanitarian aid, and technological standards. Yet, as with all empires before it, questions arose about sustainability and morality. Could a nation born from revolution remain the world's dominant power without repeating the patterns of control it once resisted? The story of American expansion, from the 19th century frontier to the digital frontier of the 21st, reveals a remarkable continuity. The tools and languages of empire changed, but the underlying drive to shape the world according to its values and interests endured. Power shifted from land to information, from conquest to connectivity, but the essence of influence remained. Today, the United States stands at a crossroads. Its power is vast, but its world is more interconnected and uncertain than ever before. The same technologies that spread its influence also challenge its control. The global economy it helped create now empowers rivals as well as allies. Yet the imprint of its expansion, political, economic, and cultural, remains visible in every corner of the modern world. From the first settlers who crossed the Appalachian Mountains to the engineers who launched satellites into orbit, the American story has been one of movement, ambition, and transformation. Across centuries, it has built bridges and borders, liberated and dominated, inspired and divided. Its empire is not of geography, but of systems and imagination, a complex legacy that continues to shape the future of humanity. As the 21st century advances, the echoes of that long expansion remain. The world still debates, resists, and embraces the influence of a nation that began as a colony and became the most powerful force in global history. Its legacy is written not only in wars and treaties, but in technologies, cultures, and ideas that define what it means to live in the modern age. The story of American empire is, in many ways, the story of the modern world itself. An unfinished chapter in humanity's ongoing search for power, purpose, and progress.